Have you ever thought about getting into rentals, but the what ifs stop you? What if the tenant wrecks the place? What if you can't find the right deal? You're not alone. But imagine starting with a simple, realistic plan, one that works even with a full-time job and a busy family, and watching it grow into steady income and long-term freedom. You're listening to How to Hack Real Estate, practical plays for everyday investors. I'm Jake. I'm your MC and Scott Krusemark's on-air DJ, bringing you along for real conversations with real people making the leap into property investing. Today we're tackling the question, how do you safely buy your first rental and make it profitable without losing your nights, your weekends, or sanity? Today's guest is a mechanical engineer named Dan from Strongsville, Ohio. Dan has a meaningful career working on cutting-edge medical tech. He's a husband and a dad of 3 boys looking to start small and build towards financial independence. In this episode, you'll hear how creating a life-first vision statement can keep you going when the pipes burst or doubt creeps in. You'll hear how to lower your landlord risk with smart tenant screening, durable property choices, and avoiding the trap of believing every horror story you hear. You'll hear how to find and fund deals if you're not going through a traditional bank, and Scott's even going to share his 22-point tenant scorecard and the the red flag that kills an application instantly. So, if you're ready to replace hesitation with a clear, confident real estate strategy, stick around for this episode of How to Hack Real Estate. All right, ready and welcome for the inaugural episode of How to Hack Real Estate with Scott Krusemark. We are very excited today to be joined by a good friend from university, Dan Morgan of Cleveland, Ohio. Hey, Dan, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. And our host here, Scott Krusemark. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Went
Fantastic.
to the pool earlier today.
Nice.
Which is good because it was really hot.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it as hot in Ohio as it is here in St. Louis?
Yeah, and we're not used to it here.
This morning at 7:30, they said it was 86% humidity. And so I said, thanks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay, you got to the pool.
Yep, I fully understand.
So, Dan, as you know, this show is a live, basically, coaching session from Scott, who's a veteran coach, especially in the real estate space, but also loves that life component. And he excels at sort of the reverse engineering a life story and understanding kind of, you know, where somebody wants to be and where they are and that kind of that gap in between. And we're going to hand it over to Scott to kick off with some of his questions for you.
Sounds good.
So I'd like to start off and kind of understand who you are. So kind of give me a brief history, not just real estate, but kind of everything that you've done. What I'm looking for as you talk about it is what kind of skills you learned along the way. So whether they were successful skills or learning experiences, I'm okay with that because even a learning experience, you learn something. So kind of give me I don't want to say too brief, but a brief description of what you've done in your life and what kind of things you've learned.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, well, I come from 2 parents who are heavily invested in the real estate world. So I grew up with a dad who always had a rental property, or multiple ones actually, and they had to, from time to time, go and find a new tenant or go fix something. So I am very familiar with that field. And my background, my career, I went to Cleveland State with Dan here.
Go Vikings.
Go Vikings. And so I was a resident assistant with Dan, which was a great time and a great experience. Just kind of mentoring the other residents, planning events, and keeping everyone in line, of course.
Okay.
So I studied mechanical engineering, and with that degree comes, as you probably know as an engineer yourself, a lot of technical knowledge, a lot of hands-on experience.
And problem solving.
And problem solving, right? Okay, double E.
Yep, so bachelor's and master's, so I understand that engineering is a problem solving domain.
Absolutely, yeah. And so similar to you, I look at the world with kind of an analytical perspective in many ways. But I think that's that kind of engineering mindset has been helpful for even owning my own house here, especially when something breaks. Just not being afraid to dive in there and figure out how to fix it. So that's kind of a high level summary of my background. And if you have any other specific questions, I'd be happy to go deeper.
Now, you did a full 4 year in mechanical engineering?
Yes, and then I also did 1 extra year for my master's.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, you'd indicated that you were interested in the real estate domain. Have you done any education and or purchases and or investing in properties?
Yeah, so back in 2017, I did buy a condo, and just a couple of years ago, 2023, I sold the condo and then bought the house I'm in now, which is a 4-bedroom house. But as far as investing goes, I haven't done any I haven't bought any properties for rental purposes. Yeah.
So part of the question is what is it you want to do? Where do you want to go? I mean, in terms of we can phrase it in terms of the real estate. We can also phrase it in terms of what you want your life to look like. If I said, I've got a magic wand and I could, give you whatever it is you want 5-10 years from now, what would you want that life to look like?
It's a great question. I think the financial independence is one of those wishes from my genie. And I think part of that is having my house paid off would be just a real load off my back. So I think that would be part of it. And, I am open to achieve those goals of financial freedom.
Sure.
Open to having a rental property to help that come true, possibly.
Okay. Would you be looking for 1, 2, 10, 100?
I think probably just one to start off with. And then, because I think part of the equation here as well is I am married with 3 kids. And so, trying to balance the family life in addition to my career,
Sure.
I want it to be kind of manageable in that regard.
Right. So do you have a regular job?
I do, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
full-time
what
job.
What is?
Yeah, so I design medical devices as a mechanical engineer, and I work at a company that we're working on a product that is an MRI machine that can target and basically kill tumorous cancer cells.
Wow.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay. And you enjoy what you do there?
I do, yes.
Is that something that you would want to keep in this 10-year vision?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I do have a passion for medical device development,
Cool.
and I do feel like it's really contributing to society. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. To me, it sounds like a dream job.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's cool. So what you'd want to do, what you're looking at is to build some of that passive income, or you want to learn, or what's your kind of if I had to pick one why, what is it what's your why?
Yeah, I think
you mentioned financial freedom, but
yeah,
that's pretty broad.
true. Yeah. Yeah, I think it would be the passive income, having that set up where, have a rental property, for example, and you get that extra monthly income, and then that affords your family to go maybe on an extra trip per year, or do something more that you wouldn't normally be able to afford, I think would be ideal.
Okay, so you're looking for kind of an incremental increase in your income,
Yeah.
as opposed to a replacement for your income.
Correct.
Okay, because that changes the target. Most of the people I talk to look at it from the perspective of that while they love their job, we have a mix between those that love their job and those that hate their job, or that tolerate their job, maybe a better word. And what they're looking for is enough passive income that they're not dependent on the job, right? So, which is way more than one rental. Not unless it's a really, really big rental. So, all right. So when you were doing things with your parents, now was your mother involved in the process?
Yeah, she was. She helped find tenants for it and do painting, and yeah, she was very much involved as well.
So who was doing the bookkeeping and the kind of the back office stuff?
That would be my mom. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just as a note, that's the way that works around our house.
Okay.
My wife handles, well, she's a detail person.
Yeah.
I'm more of that. So it's been described as I can see the forest and the trees. So I understand, and that's part of the engineering, is that I can look at things in the microcosm, but also understand how they relate to other things in other pieces and be able to put it all together as a forest. It helps with the programming aspect, because of course that's the way you have to program, do things in modules. But so I look at it from those, a lot of different perspective, but she handles the details.
Yeah, Anne is
very
she wants to
focused.
know where all the pennies went.
Right. So when it's really funny because we'll say, okay, so how much rent are we getting in from this unit? And she'll go, well, it's $610.15. And I'm like, okay, so $600. No, $610.15. But that's our different personalities, and we've been married 45 years, so we've kind of gotten used to each other. And I love that we can work together. Is your wife interested in getting involved in some fashion?
I think at this phase in our lives, probably not, to be honest. And I think maybe because our kids are younger and
Sure.
she's very involved with that.
Yeah, and
But
that's
it's-
an important
yeah.
phase of life for sure.
Yeah.
Does
And-
she have
yeah.
a job outside of the main job of being a mom?
Not currently, yeah. She left her teaching job to be a stay-at-home mom. Yeah, so it's really nice that we can do that.
Yeah.
How old are the boys now?
They are 6, 4, and 2. They're 3 boys. So there's never a dull moment at our house.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So I guess the question is, what do you see as the next step? And we'll talk about that. What do you see?
Yeah, I think probably trying to understand the risks and how to move forward with not just, I think one of those being purchasing a home, a second home,
Mm-hmm.
and, reading the current market. And then secondly is there's some, I would say, some concerns with being a landlord. For example, you get a tenant who comes in and destroys the place. You have to go in and get new carpet, new paint, everything else.
Sure.
So there's that concern. And then also there's a concern of if someone doesn't pay, you'd have to take them to court. And so there's that eviction process.
Sure.
So those I think are currently a few of my main roadblocks.
So are these concerns the thing that's holding you back?
I would say so, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to throw just a general answer out, and then we can drill a little deeper. So we've been in real estate since 2002. We've had probably 100 tenants over the years. 95% of them just pay on time and stay. They're not a problem. Yes, we have a few bad tenants. But what happens in the real estate industry is the tenant paid. It's a terrible story. Okay, so here you are.
Doesn't make any
you're listening
headlines.
to all these investors, and all you hear are the ugly stories of that 2% that were a problem, right? And they paid the rent. They gave us notice when they left. And a lot of times when they do leave, they leave stuff behind. We've had a couple of tenants that have been hoarders. The good news is that the true hoarders typically are non-destructive to the property. They just have lots of stuff, lots and lots and lots of stuff. Okay, so you spend $3,000 to $5,000 emptying the place out. Yes, that's money that you've spent. And then the place is in pretty good shape. Now, whenever we have a turnover, we almost always paint. And we used to use carpet for most of for the flooring, and the LVP, luxury vinyl plank, has gotten sturdy enough that we can go through a couple of turnovers and not have to do anything with the flooring, and that has made a big difference. Because the tenant, I don't understand it. The tenant will be in there 3 years, and the carpet's absolutely destroyed. In our personal house, we finally replaced it at 35 years. At about, I'm being corrected, 40 years. And at about 30 years, it had reached its lifetime. So we got 30 years out of that carpet versus a 3-year totally destroyed. I don't understand.
Is it normally destroyed from pets?
It's everything. It's wear and tear. It's people spilling stuff. It's pets. Just, traffic. It's the fact that most of the time they don't vacuum. So it gets dirty and just stays dirty. Grind it in. But the point I want to make is, that yes, those things do happen. You do have to evict. You do have, turnovers. You do have all those things. For the most part, 90-95% of the time, if you've done a reasonable job up front of, filtering them, making sure that you do your due diligence, they're good tenants. People in general are good. And yeah, you're going to get a few that are going to slip through your filtering process. You have I think it's a 22 item checklist for the score list. So when we go through an evaluation, we have 22 items, and they get points for, do you have a bank account? They get a couple of points. Have you had an eviction? They're out of there. Because once they've understood the legal system, they understand the legal system. Okay, so we don't want them. And we just go down. Do they have 3 times the rent? Have they been evicted? What's if they're in Section 8, which is the government-sponsored things, then we just take the couple of questions that are about the financial and just say, yeah, no, they don't count. So we don't add those into the total. And then we come up with a score, and typically most of the tenants we end up with a score of what works out at about 75 or 80%. Nobody's perfect, and we don't look at credit score. We do look at their credit report and ask, are they behind on phone bills, their cell phone, car payment, rent? And if those 3, if they have medical, whatever. Now, if they're seriously behind on the medical, then we do an evaluation. And so we go through that kind of scoring. And so we get tenants that, for the most part, are pretty reasonable. So the concerns you have, while they're valid, they're also low probability.
Yeah.
And there are things that you can do to reduce those probabilities, like good filtering. Now, you can't have 100% filtering. It's just not possible, because people lie on the application. They'll have their cousin fill out the application in their name. The prior landlord, sounds a lot like your cousin. And part of our process is to make sure, is to go through and check those things. So I guess the question comes back to you then, okay, so if I can educate you on how to deal with those concerns, and they're valid concerns, then, what would be the next thing that would tend to stop you?
Yeah, I think, that's a really good perspective, and I like how you framed it of you only hear about the 2% or so of the cases, which is true, and so I think that definitely helps quell my concern for that. I think other than that, it would be, how do you select a rental? I guess, and there's some layers to that of in what location, what size, and then there's the whole piece of, I have to put down a down payment for that. So is the bank going to be a little more particular about me owning 2 properties?
So let me go that direction. So most people, it's right now, the problems that most of the investors are having is in this order: finding properties, finding funding, and finding contractors. Because of course you don't want to pay retail prices for any of that, right? So finding the properties, there's probably 30 or 40 different ways of finding properties. Most people think MLS and they quit there. But you can go onto Zillow, you can go onto Craigslist, you can do what's called driving for dollars. You basically just drive around looking for properties that look like they're vacant. Then you contact the owner. right? So on-market properties and off-market properties. And right now, the best deals are the off-market properties, but they're a little harder to find, obviously. On-market properties, nice, but they're picked over. So we can deal with finding properties. And networking is probably the best thing right now. There's a bunch of, I know you said you were in Cleveland. There's a bunch of meetup groups and real estate investor associations. There are two good ones up in Cleveland. One on the east side, one on the central portion. And so you network, you find a property. Now you got the second problem, which is finding funding, right? Well, most people have this picture that the only place to get funds is the bank, right? Well, that's not exactly true. It's not even close to being true. And we use banks a lot. We use them for the long-term funding, so we use these other sources for short-term funding. So we can get the property, get it fixed up, get it rented, and then we go to the bank and refinance it. A couple of problems with banks. They're really, really, really slow. They can take anywhere from 2 to 4 months to get the processing done. I mean, you bought 2 houses, you know that it's not a quick process you go through the bank. They also require down payments, and in the investing world, the down payment, the amount the bank is willing to loan you is based on the purchase price. We're not buying properties that are perfect. We're buying properties that need rehab, but there's not money for the rehab piece of it. So you go to the secondary sources. Private money, maybe your parents are willing to fund you. Maybe they're willing to invest in you. Hard money lenders, private money lenders. Your parents would be considered, I'm not sure, they would fall in between. I define hard money as people that do it because they're real estate investors, they understand the real estate. Private money are people that don't understand the real estate. Obviously, that's a spectrum. So your parents are going to be more toward the hard money, although hard money usually is high rates and private money is usually low rates. They'll probably give you a low rate. But there's hard money lenders out there. And, so if you say, okay, well, the cost of the money that I need to borrow to buy the property and get it fixed up, that's just a number you can calculate. So it becomes another expense when you calculate your repair costs. You just calculate it in as another expense. And so you have to buy accordingly. So finding funds, again, sounds like networking. And there's a lot of different kinds of sources out there. I mean, there's some government funding. There's all sorts of funds out there that are willing to loan you money. The problem with a lot of funds, that the folks that contact me, they kind of fall that 90-10 rule. 90% of them are perfectly honest. Now, which one's which?
It's a question. That is the question.
Yep. Right. So finding the funding is, it's important. You have to do that. And then finding contractors. And the absolute easiest way is you call up another investor. You have one in the family, so you got to start there and say, hey, I need a roofer. Who's a good roofer? And even if they don't know who a good roofer is, they know somebody who does know who a good roofer is. And you're looking for investor-friendly contractors, right? Because if I just open up what used to be the yellow pages, I just go find a contractor out there, they're most likely a retail contractor. So they have to do all this marketing and spend all this money and go to a homeowner one time, right? And then never see him again, right? So they can charge extra dollars. Whereas if I approach a contractor, I'll probably use, a furnace contractor, for example, I might use them 3 times a year. Whereas if I'm a homeowner, I'm going to use them once in a lifetime. Right?
Yeah.
So the dollars involved are different. So the investor-friendly contractors are such that they're willing to take a slight discount because they know they're going to get a repeat business and they don't have to market for it.
Yeah.
And they've got
a really
continuous
good point.
business.
Yeah, I never thought of that. And especially as you get more properties, that discount probably becomes even better.
Yeah.
So, yeah, well, that's good to know. I didn't realize they did that.
There's a lot of systems built up in the investing world. And so part of what happens, especially with beginners, with newbies, I don't like that term, but it is pretty descriptive. is that they've come out of essentially the homeowner world, and there's only one way to do things. You go to the bank. You open up, well, it used to be the Yellow Pages. Now it's a Google search, and finding properties, well, you go to the MLS. That's the only place. And so you end up with these narrow selections, and you're competing against all the other people that are looking the same way. So, with the MLS, if I'm trying to find a property, I'm competing with a homeowner that does not have to calculate profit into their purchase, right? So they're going to be able to pay more than I'm going to be able to pay because I need to calculate in some profit. I think about a fix and flip. If the property, when it's all fixed up, is worth $100,000, which, in Cleveland's not that much. Down here, I'm about an hour south of you, and so $100,000 makes the math easy. They can pay $100,000 for that property. They're going to have to put $20,000 down and then get a bank loan for $80,000. Well, if I'm competing against that, my starting point is $70,000 before I calculate my repairs. Oh, I have to subtract off my repairs. I use 5 different equations depending on the circumstances. Is it going to be a rental? Is it fix and flip? Do I have all cash? That's one of the equations. If I have all cash, then the math is completely different. So I have 5 different equations because different circumstances require different equations. If I'm going to do a fix and flip, my end user is a homeowner. Well, how does he calculate how much that he's going to pay for it? That house is $100,000. That house is $100,000. That house is $100,000. My house had better be $100,000. They don't care about cash flow. As an investor, as a rental, I don't really care what the value of the property is. I'm willing to overpay using that equation. So I might pay $120 for it as long as it cash flows. So I'm interested in a different equation. So I'm going to calculate it differently. Now, I still need that number because if I'm looking at property and they're going to try to sell it to me at $150, I'm probably going to pass.
Yeah.
So these are the real estate pieces of what I do. So I've been in real estate since 2002. I'm an informationaholic. I love information. So I can teach that stuff in my sleep. You've seen 4 or 5 different things that I've talked about tonight. But it's also important to understand the why. What's your motivation? That's why I asked about financial freedom. Yeah, that's pretty generic. Passive income. Those absolutely. I think about one rental with what I hear you're trying to accomplish, and that's going to be a little skimpy. If you've got debt on it, and that's a whole discussion in itself, whether you go debt free or use debt, and I have a lot of thoughts on that. Most of the time you're going to end up with debt, especially when you're first starting. So, if you have a rental, you're going to be looking at $200, $300, $400 a month worth of passive income. You can't live on $200, $300, but you can use it as a starting point and be able to build up a small portfolio. A lot of the gurus that are out there, they've got 500, 1,000 properties. That's too much work. I don't want that. I don't want to work that hard. So our portfolio is much smaller than that. I use the example of getting 20 properties. So you buy 20 properties and you buy them with debt. So you're probably going to walk away after you have some set-asides for, that roof's eventually going to go out, so you need to have some set-asides. You need set aside for vacancy. You may want to do property management, so you set it aside as if you're going to do it. If you do it yourself, which I recommend when you first start, but you still set it aside as if you're going to do that. You're probably going to walk away with, $100, $200, $300 a month on 20 properties. We'll make the math easy. $100 a month on 20 properties, that's $2,000 a month. Yeah, that's not, it's a nice addition, but you can't live on it. Run that forward till the debt's gone. Now you're looking at $500, $600, $700, $800 a month. Now, these numbers are based on more or less this area. Your numbers are a little bit higher than my numbers, but Ohio is some of the cheapest property in the country and the best ratio between property cost and the rent. And so, those numbers are going to vary depending on where you are. But, so you run it forward to the debt's gone. Now you're looking at, I'll make the math easy, take the low end, $500 a month times 20 properties. That's $10,000 a month passive income. That's real walkaway money. That's not money that's, and most people I know can live on $10,000 a month.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to mention the increase in value of each home, which generally goes up over time.
Yep. And so, time heals a lot of mistakes. Not all mistakes. We've been there, done that, bought that T-shirt. And, to me, the core is, okay, so you're 6 months into this process and you have a tenant leave and a roof goes out and, it's like, oh, do I really want to do this? You need to have a good why. The first exercise I do with any of my coaching students is to have them write a vision statement. And it's a life vision, not just a business vision. What does your family situation look like? What's a 10 in family? What's a 10 in spiritual? What's a 10 in hobbies? All the different kind of categories. And business is just one more category. And that keeps your balance better. So I have a specific exercise that you go through to help develop that. And each vision statement that I've ever read is unique. They're all different. I've seen half-page ones, and I've seen 17-page ones. I like the 2-page versions because it gives me enough detail. Mine is about 3, and it's a little long. But knowing where you want to go, what does a 10 look like in your life in the various different areas, then you can say, okay, well, let's do some things that move the needle toward that. It is freaking amazing that I've been in various different masterminds that focused on vision, and that's where I met Jake. Out of the probably 400 people that I've come in contact with, about 150 of them made a serious inroads into their vision statement. And almost every single one of them, about 6 months after they finally made their vision statement solid, a lot of them will go, I know what I want. All right, fine, I'll write it down. They finally write it down. About 6 months later, they're like completely different people because they know where they're going. Most of the time, within 6 to 9 months, they have to rewrite their vision statement because they achieved almost everything they wanted. You're never going to achieve all of it, but that's not the goal. The goal is to set your sights on where you want to be. So a vision statement to me is really important. Is that related to real estate? Nah. Is it affect real estate? Absolutely. So, writing down that vision statement is a critical piece. Then to me, the final thing that is what determines success is knowledge and action. It's the combination. Not only do you need to know how to go to the bank and ask them for ask the right questions at the bank, but you also need to be able to actually do that. And it's that pair of the knowledge. I mean, if you just walk in a bank, they're gonna take advantage of you. We're investors. We look at things way different than the bank does. So we have to educate them or find banks that somebody else is educated for us. But if we don't know the right questions, then, and so it's that pair of the knowledge plus the action. A friend of mine says, buy more faster. So it's like, you get, who is it? Joe McCall. Jake knows Joe McCall. Is one of the investors in St. Louis, and he has a program that he set up, and I think it's absolutely insane that you're supposed to make 5 offers a day. You get weekends off.
You do.
Okay, so in 1 week you've made 20. In a month you made 100 offers, and if you don't have a property in those 100 offers, then there's something seriously wrong. Out of 100 offers, you should have a minimum of 5 properties. Now, do I think that's a great idea? Yeah, if you're doing this full time and you're willing to, offend people and do all that. But if you think about it from that kind of perspective of the more offers you make, you're going to get deals.
Scott, do you have an opinion on sheriff sales? Do you like them? Do you not like them?
Yeah, they're good. It depends kind of what triggers the sheriff sale. They can be time consuming in terms of, because you're competing against a number of other investors sometimes, and sometimes you're the only person that shows up. And in that case, then you bid a buck and, maybe you get the property. In the state of Ohio, there's a sequence that they build an appraisal, current value appraisal, and the opening bid must be 60% of that appraisal. If it doesn't sell that first time, then the second time they do it, which is about 2 months later, then the opening bid is $1. So, so if you have somebody at that first bid that's an idiot, then that bid's gone. And, to me, 60% of the current appraised value probably is pretty close to my max, okay? It takes a whole bunch of things into account. The fact that there's probably some repairs, and the fact that the appraisal may be too high, and, like I said, a bunch of things. That's not the way I calculate it, but 60% is probably at or above my step out bid, the max I'm going to bid on something. I think they're great if you can find the deals. The one thing is that you're going to have to be able to estimate the property right then at the bid. Be able to walk through the property, because you won't be able to see it ahead of time. That's part of the sales process. Now, do I also think that auctions aren't sheriff sales, but they're very similar, are also a good source? Absolutely. Again, depending on the company that's doing the auction. There's an auctioneer down here. Since nobody knows it in the country, I won't mention the name, but they've built up this huge mailing list. They have like 16,000 names on their mailing list, and whenever they sell anything, it is going to go for too much. But there's 8 or 10 small little companies around here. So they don't get very much business, which means they don't get very many people at their auctions. Those are good places to buy stuff. So that's another place. I'm driving for dollars. Those stupid signs that say, we buy houses, they actually work. They're illegal everywhere. Just get over it, you drive around and you see them, right? Some places they'll put them up and they'll be there for 6 months. Those are great places to put them up.
Yeah,
right?
what is the deal with those?
Those are called bandit signs. And basically, most of the time they're wholesalers, which is yet another list that you're interested in. So those bandit signs, basically, you put them up, and they have "We Buy Houses" and a phone number. And then you better answer that phone. But if you do, then somebody has got a house to sell. Either that, or it's another investor looking to, which is also one of the things. You actually call all of the bandit signs and saying, well, I don't have a house, but I'm interested being on your buyer's list.
Okay, it's good to know.
So, yeah, these are the kind of things that So the way I run my coaching sessions is I have a small topic that we start with. We evaluate what you committed to do from last time, and then, it's kind of, I won't say open for discussion, but, it's like you can bring your questions like those, and then I'll go into much more detail on, here's how you do it. We're not exactly short on time, but I don't want to take too long. And then we set commitments for what are you going to do between now and the next time we get together.
Yeah.
I can run, you're close enough if you really wanted to, you can come down and we can get together physically, or we can do this on a Zoom call or a phone call. And typically what I end up with is at the beginning, we'll do a little bit more often, like once every other week, or maybe once a week, depending on circumstances. And then we stretch it out, because what ends up happening is what you need to do, you need to just go do it. Make 10 offers. That's your assignment. Make 10 offers. Which means you have to do this, 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 and this to get to the point where you can make the offers. Well, you can't make 10 offers every week. If you can, great, go for it.
And do you typically work with a real estate agent, or do you do it, you kind of go on your own?
All of the above. We have bought things from, we bought, for sale, where it's the seller is selling it directly. We've gone through realtors. We've bought it from wholesalers. Wholesalers are basically, Jake has a property, I'm the wholesaler. Jake has a property, I get it under contract as if I'm going to buy it, and I sell you the contract. There's some legal issues, so some fine print here. That's the basic description. I sell you a contract to buy the house. That's a wholesaler. Well, that means I'm doing all the marketing to find those properties. We've done postcards where we've mailed to a list, and pretty good. We actually had pretty good luck with that. That's one of those old school things that still work. There's social
Snail
media.
mail.
Yep, snail mail. That's right. There's those bazillion and one phone calls that you're getting, spam. Those are callers, and that's another way of finding properties. So, how many different ways you can find properties?
Cool. So, I guess Scott, you've like gotten a kind of a picture of Dan's life right now
Mm-hmm.
and some of his interests. Can you just sum up what you think Dan's best like on ramp to real estate would be? What's like his strategy that he should follow?
Well, I think getting the rentals, since you have the job that's going to provide you income that is stable. Some of the listeners are not going to have a stable income. They're working at Walmart as greeters, but you don't have that problem. You have enough money coming in from your regular job. That's important that you've got that as a stable point. So to begin with, the real estate is kind of sort of going to look kind of like a hobby. Okay? I mean, you don't treat it that way, but that's, it's an extra. All right. And so I'm thinking about what your goals are of passive income and financial freedom and of those kind of things. And I'm thinking that you're going to be more than one property. You can start with one. You're going to start, and the first one is always the hardest, just flat out. The second one, if the first one was somewhat easy, the second one's hard. And then by the time you get to 4 or 5, it's like, oh, I just need to get another one. It gets fairly easy to find. You find what the patterns are. Every time you buy a property, you're going to learn something. Well, the first time you got to learn it all. Well, you don't learn all of it. You learn, you're going to learn that much. Okay. Then the next property, you're going to learn, shift it over. You're going to learn that extra little bit, and it's repeated. So by the time you've gotten to 5 or 6, you've got most of it mastered.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's just like having kids. The first one's the hardest.
Yep.
Once you get your system down, you're good to go.
Yep. Yeah, I think 3's enough, but we ended up with 2 girls, and they have flown the coop, so we're empty nesters.
Oh, congrats.
So, yeah. And I think we actually did a good job with them.
That's great. Yeah.
They're both
Nothing better.
They're both following their passion. Completely different passions, but following their passion. And okay, so back to answer Jake's question. I would say probably start the process trying to get 5 properties. Somewhere along that process, you're going to start to figure out whether this is for you. I mean, it's an industry, and there's some work involved. The question is, are you willing to put in that work and consistently over the long term? And to a certain extent, you won't find out the answer to the long-term question until you've done it a little while. When you first start, there's a lot of motivation. So, kind of target getting 5 properties. I would suggest in the single-family realm. Those are easy to get into. They're not as expensive as some of the multifamilies. So if you fail, it's going to hurt, but it's not going to hurt really, really bad. And then along the way, as you discover what it is that you feel comfortable doing, because obviously there'll be things that you really just don't like doing. My example is the bookkeeping. So I found a solution. She doesn't like it, but she does a very good job with it. And so, you can find out what you're good at, what, you want to work in your genius zone, what you're really good at. Maybe you'll figure out your genius zone is finding properties. Great. Maybe it's finding wholesalers who find the properties for you. Great. But you discover that over time. So I would say, kind of think about it in terms of not just one property, but in terms of a few, knowing that goal is non-static, that it's a dynamic goal. If I were to define a long-term, what would you target, 10, 15 years from now? I would say probably in that 20, 25 range. That'll give you enough cash flow but not so many properties that, if you think of each property as a kid, every kid that you add gets more and more complicated, right? You have to pay for college, you have to pay, buy clothes, all of that. And so fewer properties, is a great idea. Now, is that for you? I know folks that 100 properties is their goal and that it's perfect for them, So I'm not suggesting, I mean, we haven't narrowed it down enough yet to be able to definitively say where I think you should go long term. But I think, more than one. When you said one, it was like, there's not enough money in one.
That's the newbie speaking, I think.
He did say start with one. He did say start with one.
Yeah,
So,
that's
but
true.
Dan, I want to ask you now, what's your, maybe hopefully some light bulb moments, but what's the biggest takeaway you had from today's session?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of good takeaways. One of them being starting with a vision statement. What's your why? Why are you doing this? And I think that I could see that coming in handy, especially when you have to get up in the middle of the night to repair, a plumbing issue or something like that. And then I think also just kind of quelling some of my concerns, like how, you hear about 2% of the stories, which are the horror stories. So those are probably a couple of my big takeaways. And I did learn a lot, so I appreciate you taking the time to explain all this.
As you might figure, I like talking.
Well, you're good at it too.
Well, good. Glad to hear that, Dan. I think those are some good takeaways. Scott's definitely a fountain of information. I mean, it's, as you said, that vision exercise is something that's really cool, and it's the first exercise that, Scott does to help build the whole strategy from the ground up in his coaching program. And then one of the things that's cool is with his coaching program, it's a whole year of working together, 12 months to get 10 opportunities to kind of close deals. That's kind of Scott walking with you on that kind of thing. So if you're feeling the nudge, if you think maybe, this could be your path into real estate, we just want to know if that's something you'd like to explore.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I would definitely like to keep in touch, Scott, and kind of further the conversation from here.
Awesome.
Cool.
Sounds pretty good. Well, this has been an awesome first episode of How to Hack Real Estate. I learned something. Dan learned something. Scott, maybe you did too. Who knows?
A little bit.
Well, very good. Hey, to all listeners out there, just give us a like, a share, and a subscribe so you get more episodes of How to Hack Real Estate.